everyone. I'm getting in here before Casper does. And welcome to episode 109.
Yes.
And this one, I think, is a very interesting one that some people may or may not be involved in.
We're back on the serious train.
We're back on the serious.
If you listen to the last one, we're back on the serious train.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Take that smile off your face. We're about to get real serious. No, so we're going to talk today about marketing through mergers and acquisitions. So
that is serious.
Yes. So we did an episode with Shiv about post-acquisition when you're acquired, but this episode we want to talk about when your business acquires a new brand. Mm-hmm. From a marketing perspective, what do you do? So I'm going to kick it first over to you, Casper. Do you have any experience in the lovely area of M&A?
Quite a bit. Okay. Probably, I don't know, quite a bit compared to a lot of people. So we not only did I have experience a bit at Templify, where we bought a bunch of companies when I was there, but I also worked at United FinTech, where the whole premise of that company was to buy other companies and then integrate them. So I have tried it quite a bit. And also, technically we also bought Felix, a small company for Sparkforce, right? Mm-hmm. So I've tried it quite a bit, and it's definitely not my last time doing it. So I definitely have quite a bit of experience in this field. I think if we start at the top, I think one of the first kind of questions you need to figure out is essentially the why. So fundamentally, and sometimes I found sometimes it's not your decision, right? Like at Templify, I had no say in what was going on. Yeah. It's just like, we're buying this company, we bought them. Like, all right, cool. I had a little bit of say in United FinTech, but mostly it was also just like happening, right? Yeah. But first you have to understand, like, why are we buying this company? What's the whole premise of buying this company? And for a lot of the cases, what we bought, Templify was a little bit special, but United FinTech, it was the product and the people. Mm-hmm. And just the reason I'm saying that is just to say, it was not the marketing. I think one of the companies we bought at United FinTech had a marketing muscle, and I'm not hurting anyone's feelings here with saying that, but the others, that's not why we bought them. No pun intended. So I think you got to ask yourself, why are you buying this company, and figure out the reason why. So is it because they have a good product that you can integrate? Like what needs to happen there? That's the first thing you need to do. And then then you need to figure out, like, what are their strong sides? Like, what is it they're good at? So almost like as an agency, we do a lot of these like marketing audits. Kind of need to do an audit of this new company. Like, so audit them through and through. What's working, what's not. Mm-hmm. Like what's working for them in marketing. Sometimes that's easy, and sometimes it takes a lot of time. Yep. So identify what's working and then what's worth learning or keeping. Yeah, because that's essentially what you're trying to do.
And I think that's a really interesting question, at least of like the why and what are we acquiring. Yeah. Right, because you're right. You could be acquiring people. I know M&A is a growth strategy. There's a GTM strategy of like, we want to be present in DACH. And we don't want to build up from scratch, so let's buy a business in DACH, and then now we're there, right? There's a lot of reasons people acquire.
And you buy revenue. I forgot to mention that. Sometimes you just buy revenue. Sometimes it's just like, okay, we need to double our ARR. Let's buy half of it. You just buy a company that has half. Okay, half target done. Check. It's literally like that sometimes. Yeah, anyways,
and that's wild. No, that's fine. And when I was at Dixa, we acquired 3 companies in 2 years.
Exactly.
So we did 2 companies at the same time, and then we had 1 company on its own. And that was for it was for the people and the product. But I think at the end of the day, there comes a point where it's usually the product.
Yeah.
And
it's very rare when in SaaS, at least, that you buy a company and it's not because of the product. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like, because like, why otherwise are you buying something? Like,
exactly.
You're buying because typically, and then it could be like a feature ad. Mm-hmm. Like it can be because like you feel like you're adding a feature, like a category that you're not servicing at the moment. So like when Salesforce goes out and originally, let's say they bought Pardot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about that. But let's say you go out and buy Pardot. That was because they didn't have a marketing suite. They didn't so that was like a new feature or a new category for their product. That happens a lot. Then there's a lot of the ones where they go out and buy a piece of a company because it makes their product better, not just adding features, but because they're better. So I think to some extent you could argue that HubSpot buying Clearbit is that. It's not necessarily a new feature, but like, hey, it's Clearbit is a data enrichment, and that was really well suited with what HubSpot is doing. They had their Breeze product already, so So that made the product better, right?
And that's what we did at Dixa as well. It was buying a chatbot tool. Rather than building our own, we'll buy another one. And then it was analytics software. So we could integrate that into our... So Dixa is a customer support platform. So having really, really good analytics was something that why build it when we could just acquire it and integrate it into our system.
Exactly.
So when it comes to... I think the biggest question from a marketing perspective, right, is when you acquire a brand... What do you do with that brand? You know, there's 3 different things you can do, right? You can absorb the brand. So if Sparkforce buys Montague Inc., am I now Sparkforce, or do you keep the 2 entities as they are? Or do you do like a hybrid, like when I was at Planday and it was acquired by Xero, it was Planday by Xero. So that kind of hybrid. Do you have any experience or insight into that?
Yes, but I don't think there's like... I do, but I don't think there's like a golden rule that I would like. I wish I could just say, do this every time and you'll be well off, because it's so case dependent. So first things first, if there is a brand, that's the first thing you need to consider, right? And when I say a brand, what do I mean? It means are people, and a good indicator sometimes is, are people searching for your brand? So just classic brand searches. Are people searching for your brand name? If that's the case, then you to some extent have a brand. Right? There's other factors through, but that's something I would look at. Now, if you do have a brand, like let's say the Planday Xero example here, then how much is it worth keeping the brand? Like, is it big enough that it's worth the hassle? Because it is a bit of a hassle to keep a brand.
Because you're keeping everything.
It is more work to keep a brand than to not keep a brand. Let's just be real. Like, initially, it might be more work to not keep a brand, but over time, it is more work to keep a brand. Because like then you suddenly need to have almost 2 marketing teams.
Exactly.
Because like if it just called Xero, the new planning tool, instead of Planday by Xero, then they could technically take all the Planday marketing people and put them into Xero or whatever, and then they could work on that, and then potentially could cut some people or whatever, right? That could technically have happened. So that is a decision, and you need to kind of like decide that. And then I think like. What I've found to be the case is that when you're trying to build something bigger, like when you're wanting to build something bigger, then you loop the brands in. You always try to build something bigger, but when you haven't reached critical mass yet, like it's usually pretty good to unify a brand, because they're typically the ones you're buying. Like if you're a scale up, let's say you're Templify, Planday, and they went out and Dixa, they go out and buy. The companies they're buying are typically smaller than themselves, right? So that means it has to be a really special case for them to have a brand to keep, worth keeping,
and
right?
And a lot of the companies, too, that I've seen in this process don't even have a marketing team. You know, some of them are 5 or 6. You know, you're still a company if you're 5 or 6 people. If it's the product that they're after. So they don't even have a marketing function. And that was something that you said happened a lot with your role at United FinTech, right?
Absolutely. The companies we bought, like, I think 80% of them didn't have a marketing function. Like,
so they're just like... Take it.
Take us. They had no, like, they were literally like, yes, they cared about stuff, but it wasn't, they'd never worked with marketing before. So in those cases, it was quite easy. Like, that was like, okay, guys, we're going to kill this stuff over here, and then we're going to build something better. And I was like, okay, sure, cool. That's kind of what they bought into. Right. So that was different. That's kind of my point of saying, like, if there's not a brand, just kill it, right? Whatever it is, right? I think the interesting part is when it goes so big, like say in the Xero Planday example. I think it's a good example of saying why they didn't just call it Xero and just Xero or Planday by Xero, right?
Because of the brand equity.
The brand equity, right?
And Xero was New Zealand.
Yeah.
So they had no Nordic, presence. Planday had built a Nordic presence, so by absorbing that, you lose.
Exactly, and you can kind of piggyback on that brand equity that's been created. And I think that's really interesting. It was the same thing that Salesforce with Pardot actually did. There's a reason, like, we could also just like Salesforce, and now they call it Marketing Cloud. It's a little bit confusing, but Pardot technically still exists, and you can say, like, why would that be the case? But I think you're spreading, sometimes it's just good to spread out your brand equity when you're big enough to do it.
Right.
When you're big enough to do it, you can afford to do it, and it actually creates avenues for you to do different things. I don't know if that makes sense to people listening, but you have to reach critical mass size for it to really make sense to do that. Whereas when United FinTech, there was something with the founders wanting to keep their name and their own. But in the real world, if I were to call some of the shots, I would probably just looped all of it in under United FinTech. And that's also what we did with SparkForce when we bought Felix company as an example. Like, there's no reason to keep that because there's no brand equity really.
Right.
So I think that's typically what you see and then what you want to do. Like, and then you want to like one of the things I found is that when you start doing this is you start building like build a list of all the tasks. And I remember doing that when we did Templify, the different mergers there and acquisitions also. Everything. I just built a whole, like almost have a template of all the tasks needed to be done with a merger when it comes to marketing. Yeah. There's so much, right?
Yeah.
Like, and there's also a lot of decisions to be made. Yeah, so I just made like a decision tree almost, right?
We had a whole database of just assets.
Exactly.
Just the assets.
Do we keep this? Do we rebrand it? Do we keep this? Do we rebrand it? Or keep it, rebrand? So once you made those top level decisions, okay, we're keeping the brand, we're not keeping this. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. Then you can make that massive task list, right, and start delegating.
And I guess moving on from brand, because then the next part, right, is the chaos of bringing two worlds together. In our case, we had one company that we had acquired at Dix. It was in Australia. And so suddenly I had a marketing function in Australia that was on a completely different time zone. They have their own ways of doing stuff. They have their own processes, and trying to absorb that and try to not necessarily like take over, but how do you integrate that with your processes and the stuff that you do? And sometimes maybe it's easier if you're in the same time zone, or if you're in the same, you can take a quick flight over and talk to the people in Berlin. Yeah. But why did I call it Berlin?
I don't know.
That's a great question.
That's weird.
Berlin.
Are you listening?
Tune in, Berlin. God damn. It's been one of those weeks, people. But in our case, again, it was Australia. So it was like, okay, I'll have a call with you at 9:00 at night because that is better for you. And it really kind of messed with us. But how did you do integrating all these different processes?
That's such a good question, right? So I think I wish I could say there was like we did this data-driven approach and blah 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 blah.
Perfect.
It was perfect. Everyone's total harmony.
And everyone was on board.
It's not really the case, right?
Stakeholder management was just.
So I'm gonna be. There's a big dog and there's a small dog. These kind of things. It's a little bit brutal.
Big Bill.
And small Bill.
And small Bill.
If you listen to the last episode, you'll get the joke.
Call back.
Yeah, but and the big dog gets to call the shots.
Yes.
Right? So the big dog decides how it's going to be. So don't get me wrong. I was whenever it happened, I would always look and, like, as I said in that audit, kind of like what's working, because like sometimes you do find like there are things that work, but you also have to be a little bit cynical and sometimes be like, hey, there's a reason we're buying you and you're not buying us.
Snap.
That it's a little bit brutal, but it's sometimes like that. Of course, sometimes it's because for other reasons, and their marketing is actually better than yours. But most of the time, it's probably because you figured out stuff they haven't figured out yet.
I haven't had, and I'm not going to specifically talk about, but I've never had an acquisition situation where everyone was like, "Yay!
Nope.
We've been acquired. We're safe." Like it's never been that.
And it's very often the ones that are being acquired that needs to be scared. To be completely honest and frank.
That's been my experience, is the people who've been acquired are usually the ones who take a lot of winning over and very careful.
Yes, exactly. And I think it was kind of cool. Like, we didn't actually in marketing we kept all the people and stuff, so that was good. But without mentioning, but at Templify a few heads rolled, right, from the new companies, because it's a classic saying of like, okay, let's say you have a Casper doing performance marketing, he's doing LinkedIn ads, and then on their team you have and then you also have a person doing that, and now they're looped into one, and we're not gonna keep the brand, so it's only gonna be that one brand that sticks around. And it's like, okay, do we really need two?
Yeah,
like
so
at the stage, and then you start looking at each other and like, okay, I'm big dog, you're small dog. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately kind of brutal, but that's how it goes. Yeah. Like, I wish it was easier to say, but yeah, that's typically what I found to be the case, to be honest.
I remember one particular point of an acquisition, and I won't say where, but we had known it was product only.
Yeah.
But what had been communicated is product and people, and it was a very difficult situation to be in, knowing you're kind of trying to integrate these processes so that people don't get scared, knowing full well in 6 months' time, this is not going to be the case.
Yeah.
And that I didn't really appreciate the way that particular thing had been handled.
No.
But yeah, and you're on these calls with these people who are just like, they know, but they don't know, but they know, and you know, and you're just, it's very performative. Like, yeah, sure, I'll get you that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
But it's,
thanks.
It is a very awkward, it can be very awkward. I think it can be good. I think it can be good, especially maybe in a United FinTech situation where you're buying a company that's super tiny and you can finally take their, that founder's dream and make it something that it could never be.
And you take like a lot of it, like, I think I read a study somewhere. I can't remember. It's way old, so don't quote me on the source here. And maybe I'm spitting out false facts here. I don't know. But I do recall reading somewhere that, like, I think it's more than half of all mergers and acquisitions fail. Like, you don't end up, because, like, technically, let's just make this super simple. You have 100 million ARR. You're buying a company that does 50 million ARR. Together, that should at least be more than 150. Right? And of course you'll grow, but then the goal with buying them is not just to keep it at status quo, it's to double or something. And most of the time that doesn't happen.
Yep.
Yeah. At least it takes way longer than people expect. And it's not like you're adding, because like it's not that simple. Like, it's not that simple. Like, okay, we have 100 people visiting this site, 50 people visiting this site. If we just merge them to one site, it's going to be 150. Usually doesn't end that way, right?
You lose some people.
You lose some people along the way, right? And I think that's something a lot of people forget when these things happen, is that it's not that easy. And then I've worked a lot with rebrands because that's what Templafy did and stuff, right? And wow, that's also tough, right?
Yeah.
Like getting like agreements on colors, on names, on fonts, and all that stuff. It takes so long.
Yeah.
And then that's also why I found it to be, I haven't done too much of it, but I can only imagine it must be really hard when you have these cases where it's like a 50-50, where it's more like a merger than an actual acquisition, where it's like, okay, we're equal size companies or somewhat equals in this. And then you're like, okay, you have a brand, we have a brand. We both care about our brand. What do we do?
Both of us have good organic search. Both of us have ranked very high.
Exactly.
How do you decide?
That's tough. I never had to do that. That must be really tough.
But maybe that's where you do the hybrid of a planned day by zero.
Yes. But zero is way bigger, right?
Yeah, zero.
So that's kind of like, that's the big dog.
Yeah, that was a big dog.
And it's the same with the other.
It wasn't a merger. It was an acquisition. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the same with the other cases I've had where I've fortunately been the big dog, and that's, that makes it easy, because then you're like, okay, fuck it, I call.
Yeah, we win.
Yeah, we win. Let's move on, right?
Yeah.
But it does make things easier, and you at least get to a decision point, right? Because
at least you make a decision, and I think that was the other part of the mergers. I know when we did the 3 mergers at once, essentially, no one made a decision, and because we wanted to keep the people and we wanted to keep the product, they were so proud of what they had built, and it was great enough that we wanted to buy it, but it was like, from a marketing perspective, we have 4 brands now that we're just juggling, spinning all these plates. And I remember my web developer, shout out Michael Möller. He's definitely not a listener, but he's a great guy.
If he is,
but if he's there, shout out. But, I remember he would say to me, like, I have to update the website for 4 brands and keep it updated. And
exactly.
And then, like you said, it's so stupid, but fonts matter. Like,
matters so much.
So many companies out there buy fonts.
And I also think, it's so funny because, like, a lot of people are very hesitant to kill things in this process.
Yes.
I think it is extremely important that you are willing to kill your darlings. Thank you. That was a Berlin moment.
Berlin.
That you're willing to kill your darlings in this process, right? Because, there are just things that need to go.
Yeah.
Right. And you, as an example, if you don't kill up things, you end up with 2 sites, and then you have to maintain all of it, and then it just ends in complete shit show.
And again, it becomes performative.
Yeah.
We're just doing this because we can't kill it. We don't want to kill it.
Because you can't actually make the right decision.
And then you're killing your brand in the long run because now your marketing team is just focusing on.
One of the things I found that this fucks up a lot is the classic ICP and messaging positioning.
Okay.
Because let's say you take let's use an example. Let's use maybe the Salesforce example. Salesforce acquires Pardot, and now they're suddenly part of it. Now, does that change? How much does it change for Salesforce? Because now suddenly they can offer a whole new suite, and their ICP also includes people who are interested in marketing automation. Let's take that. I haven't done any casework on this, but as an example. So, and that changes. That's part one. And then the other part is like, what does it change in terms of their positioning? Like, do they change their messaging? So instead of being this full CRM suite, it's like the full CRM and marketing automation suite, right? Or whatever it is. And I think a lot of people get this wrong real bad. Like real bad. Because then what happens is that then when they suddenly become success, then they refuse to do it. So instead of narrowing down because it becomes so wide, they start like, okay, we can't say anything. So now we're just the tool for all people in commercial.
Everywhere, we're everything to everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Everywhere,
exactly.
all the time.
And I think that's one of the biggest culprits I've seen is that I haven't seen too much in the cases I've worked with because they've been smaller, but I see it all the time in like the bigger mergers is that you integrate these products and then you like forget to change your ICP, forget to change your messaging accordingly.
Yeah.
And then you just like, okay, we're just stuck with this new thing. Yeah. And then it doesn't become integrated.
Yeah.
Like you don't integrate it properly because like you can't communicate it. The sales enablement, like the salespeople can't sell it. They don't know what they're selling. Like all this stuff happens, and it's like kind of like what do you call it? A roll-up effect or something, right?
Yeah. No, that's super interesting because it kind of pulls back to the ICP problem in general. Like you don't want to choose. You don't want to make a decision because you're going to leave money on the table somewhere. Yeah. But by not choosing, it's the same as not killing your darlings. You're just going to run yourself rabid and lose your steam and spread yourself too thin. And
I think we, without saying names and without hurting anyone's feelings here, we literally have some clients where they bought some companies, I don't even know, years ago, and they're still almost two separate companies.
Yeah.
And they're doing the exact same thing. And they're fighting for the exact same customer.
So it's funny that you said
it's
that.
like, what?
Well, so I'm just having a recovered memory. Not that this is marketing related, but before my marketing journey, I worked in the UK for a travel company and we competed against this travel company. And then as I was getting my office tour, I realized that they were in the same building as me. And I was like, that's weird. And it's like, no, we're all owned by the same owners, but we compete with each other. And we couldn't tell customers. So they're like, oh, well, we're going to get a quote from, so-and-so. So I could go down the aisle, to the other office. I'm like, hey, I'm working on this customer. They're going to go to you for an undercut, overcut them. Like we would do that because we were all the same company, and that felt wrong.
That felt so wrong. Oh God, yeah, that feels wrong.
I don't know if they still do it like that, but I remember when I learned, like, hold on,
that sounds so
office.
Wrong.
Yeah, that's very misleading. Don't do that. But
don't do
that.
I
see what you mean of keeping two brands alive because you can't decide which one to.
One thing I think we haven't talked about, which is I think is a little bit interesting, it's just in terms of that integration of teams that you mentioned, is the cultural aspect of it. I would love to just chat a little bit about that because especially so when I was at Templify, one of the companies we bought was a Dutch company.
Okay.
So it was a bunch of Dutch people, and they were, as an example, they were not used to speaking English day to day.
Really?
Only speaking Dutch.
Okay.
Right? Internally, only speaking Dutch.
That's not gonna work.
So that was like, okay, that's a bit of a change, right?
Yeah.
And the same when we at United FinTech, when we bought some companies, some of the ones were German and stuff like that, and so they were not used to speaking English either. That was a little bit more fine because they were used to trading and stuff. But I think, how do you? What's your experience with integrating other cultures, making that part work?
So the only time it's really been an issue. So we've acquired mostly Australian, German, Austrian. Yeah. So language was definitely an issue when it became time to integrate the teams. But I think I have never had this experience, but I know other people when they buy American companies or are bought by an American company, because at least in Europe you have free healthcare, you have maternity leave, you have certain things that everyone just gets. Whereas in America, you don't have that. You get it through your employer. Yeah. And so I know when people have been moved to America, there was one woman I remember I worked with. It wasn't through a merger, but we're moving an office. But I think it's the same vibe of she was like, I want the same healthcare. I want the same, education. I want all the same stuff that I have in Europe. I want that in America. And that eventually becomes too expensive to maintain. So not to comment on American culture, but we all know that that's a problem. But I think when it comes to benefits and work-life balance and all of that stuff, in Europe, we have it very good.
Yeah, we do.
We have it really
It's a
good.
bit of a rat's nest, right?
Yeah.
I'm so glad I'm not in HR sometimes when I have to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, because
right?
I think that's a big problem when you have people get pregnant. And it's like, well, in Europe, that's fine. In America, you're fired.
Exactly. Goodbye.
So there's a lot of, I think, cultural differences, particularly when you go to very different cultures. Like within Europe, it doesn't show there's a language barrier, but Denmark, the Nordic countries, and Holland tend to speak English. They have a pretty good grasp. I think DACH, not so much, but still okay.
Yeah.
But you have the same kind of basic benefits. You know, there's no like free healthcare or anything like that because it's part of the deal. But when you acquire companies that don't offer that, I think that can get very messy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And then there's of course time zones.
Time zones is a killer. Like, just be real. Like, especially if you're not used to it, like it kills a lot of collaboration.
One of the things we did at Plan Day is we hired student workers in the evenings.
Gotcha.
And that way, at least, it wasn't so much to deal with the teams because they were student workers, but it was like customer success.
Yeah.
Because we just acquired a bunch of customers in the United States. LA, for example, very different time zone. Eventually sent someone out there to live in LA to kind of run that office, but hiring student workers to do the sort of 6 till 11 shift.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
We are unfortunately running out of time.
We are.
Yeah.
I think let's summarize with the kind of top 5 questions asked, right? What are we acquiring and why?
Yeah.
Are we building a brand? Are we buying the tech? Are you buying the brand? That's another reason, right?
Yeah,
people just want to buy the brand.
Yeah.
Then how strong is that brand?
Yes.
How strong is their brand equity? Is it something you can leverage or do you just absorb it?
Yeah.
Is there audience overlap? Are they serving completely different functions? Are they serving different people? Like what's the ICP, right?
Yeah.
And then how do you make sure that your values align?
Yes.
How do you make sure that you can create harmony? And once you figure that out, let us know. Because I think the only example I could find in my research was the Facebook acquiring Instagram.
Yes.
Those two brands kept, and when it comes to keeping them separate, they're different identities, but they're owned by Facebook or Meta now. But Instagram maintained their identity, but they were able to do things that they could never do on their own.
It's also an interesting decision because you could have, to some extent, easily integrated them, right? Like, not easily, but you could have integrated them.
It could have been
just Meta.
Yeah, Meta in general. And I think they're trying to kind of do that. But it used to be called, what was Instagram used to be called? Oh, this is going to bother me now. It used to be called something else. What was it called?
So on that note, folks, thanks for tuning in. And if you know the old name of Instagram, and it apparently wasn't Bourbon.
It's just saying Bourbon, but it was some... Oh, anyway, I had that one. And it had all the filters, and you can make things look like old-timey photos, and you could...
It almost sounds like MySpace.
It's like... It was something, Insta something. Anyway, someone's screaming at us right now, and I'm
Thanks for listening, folks. Please tell us what Instagram was called so Jen can sleep.
Maybe it's not Instagram, but it was... Oh, that's really going to annoy me. And as soon as we stop, I'm not going to stop the record until I figure it out. Because, you know, as soon as I stop... No, but...